for being late. Can we get started? Yes. Okay. It is 3:53, and we're calling the meeting to order. Are there any public comments?
No public comments.
Thank you. Item number 1, we have the property insurance renewal for policy year 2025 to 2026.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, member of the board. My name is Estrella Solórzano. I'm the Director of Customer and Support Services for BPUB. And under the support part of my job, I handle and oversee the risk and insurance management. So today I'll be presenting to you our property insurance renewal. It's that time of the year. Today I'll go over just a brief description of our property insurance, provide you with a little bit of a summary. I'll give you a historical review. We'll discuss how our premium prorate data is calculated. We can also talk about we will also be talking about the property market conditions and next steps. So to begin, our current insurance broker, the broker is the person that is responsible for going out to the markets to obtain our property insurance program. They are Marsh USA, Inc. Our current consultant is Arthur J. Gallagher Risk Management Services, LLC. On the line today is also Teresa O'Brien. She's the Area Vice President for Gallagher, who can also assist in answering any questions. This was a board-approved item on March 8th, 2023, with the board's option to renew for a period of 3 years. This renewal, which would be from April 1st, 2025 to March 31st, 2026, is the last of the 3-year period. Every year, our property values increase. That's mostly due to inflation. That comes from our finance department. We work with our finance department to obtain our insurable assets that would actually be part of the property insurance program. This year, we did see a 2.38% increase in our insurable values. That again was due to inflation, which is $18,500,997. Normally, when your properties increase, your premium goes up. So this year, the good news is that our insurance premium quote, at least as of right now, we are seeing a premium decrease of 5.3% or $147,818. Now, to give you a little bit of a history in regards to our premium, as you can see on the top line and on total insurable values, from 2019 to present, our insurable values have been going up consistently. Most of the times it's been through inflation. Some of the times it's been through inflation and to acquiring new property. That's part of how of our overall growth. Our premium, if you can see in 2020, we had a big spike. A lot of it had to do with market conditions. Sometimes the market is a little bit harder to obtain insurance, so there was a big spike, and consistently we had been going up in premium. Again, the good news is that the current quote that we've received, which is a preliminary quote, because we have till March to be able to finalize that quote, so we continue conversations and negotiations to provide any recommendations that, with the assistance of our consultant, that can continue to bring that premium down while not impacting our terms and conditions or the overall coverage. That's what that means. So you can see that we have a pretty good number. If we talk about prorate data, we actually, the premium is paid by both SRWA and BPUB, depending on the insurable values of each of the entities. SRWA is $47,130,724 million, or 6% of our total insurable interest. So that means that they would be responsible for paying a premium of $158,127, and BPUB would pay the remaining 94%. Once I receive the invoice, if approved by the board, what happens is I calculate those amounts, and then we just distribute to the responsible entity to make the premium payments. These are our property market conditions, so this is what positively contributed to the premium for this year. This is a soft market, which means that we have the ability to compete, or there's more competition within the markets. Our premiums are better, as well as our terms and conditions are able to be negotiated. So I don't know if you guys have any questions at this point, or if not, I'll go ahead and go into the next steps.
Yeah, I mean, it looks pretty straightforward, but just to make sure my math is correct, if you go back to the property historical review, you have a 8% reduction there,
That's actually our rate reduction.
or rate.
It's a composite rate, correct. So
the
the premium is at the top, the total premium is at the top, it's a 2,635,000 compared to 2,783,000 and change. That's where the 5.3% exists. The bottom is what they use to calculate our overall risk.
Okay.
That's the rate.
All righty, yeah, that was it for me.
Great, so,
No questions on my part.
I'm sorry?
No questions on my part.
Thank you. So at this point, the plan is to go, we will continue to negotiate or continue conversations with our broker to continue to pull on the markets to try to give us a better premium. So the plan is to go to the SRWA meeting on March 3rd. We will be asking for their approval for our general manager and chief executive officer to negotiate and execute the documents so we can bind coverage. And we will do the same at the board meeting on March 10th. We will provide you with a not-to-exceed rate, which is what I provided at the pro-rate data. However, again, we continue till the end to try to bring that number down, and I expect that to be lower than what it is, but I do have to go to the board with a not-to-exceed number at this point. So may I have your recommendation to bring this item under consent for the board, BPUB board meeting?
That is fine with me.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, same here.
Yes, and thank you for this presentation. The historical review, I found very useful.
Thank you. Thank you both.
Thank you. Next item, phone system for BPUB.
Good afternoon,
Good
committee
afternoon.
chair and committee members. My name is Jose Luis Lopez Jr. I'm the hardware manager for the Information Technology Department. And today I'm here to present the phone system upgrade for BPUB. Before I start, just a little background here. We created a cross-functional team from the IT hardware department, IT software department, call center, customer service, and the entire some of the folks from customer service division. The reason for the upgrade, a little background. The end-of-life equipment, right now currently the equipment is already end-of-life, so that's one of the major obstacles that we have right now. This system hardware is already at its end of life or will be at the end of life come April or May. Some of the things that need to be purchased would be new blade servers, new hardware for this phone system to continue to operate, in its most efficient manner. Some of the improvements that the customer service department has some needs, and currently the current system cannot handle these needs. So some of our needs are integration of AI, mobile phone applications, additional communication tools to help reach the customers, and an external chat application that would be on the BPUB's webpage. Other things that would also come with this enhancement would be some workforce management tools, which would help the customer service department with their staffing needs, forecasting capabilities, and scheduling. Some of the things that the team did is the purchasing department went out for requests for proposals. 7 vendors responded. A team was created to review, evaluate, rank the proposals, and people from the customer service division were present, and we got together and reviewed all the proposals, the demos. There was demos that lasted, hours, 2 to 4 hours sometimes. The vendor that the team overall selected was RingCentral as the vendor to replace the current system with a cloud-hosted telephony system. RingCentral will host the entire system in a cloud-based and its own facilities. Some cost comparisons were done, and there's some vendors that at the end they did, if we wanted extra redundancy, then that would come at an additional cost. Just to finish up the slide, 7 vendors, again, submitted the proposal. 4 vendors were invited back to give interviews, present demos, and at the end, the team selected RingCentral as the vendor of choice for the phone system. Some of the, going back to the customer service enhancements, these are all enhancements that currently, again, the current phone system cannot meet these needs. And this is something that Estrella's department and division helped us out. They were very vocal on these tools that they needed. So virtual assistant, skills-based routing, workforce management, IVR scripting, live coaching, queue callback, and a ton of customized reports that this new phone system that we're proposing can alleviate or help them in their reporting needs. These were the vendors that turned in the proposals. There was 8x8, Artcom, GoTo Communications, Insight, representing Cisco, RingCentral, and TCS, representing Zoom. An actual cost comparison at the end. These are the existing phone system that we have right now versus the RingCentral phone system. So I guess we need to focus more on the yearly recurring costs, which the yearly recurring costs for the current system would be $313,968 versus RingCentral's would be $257,001. So these are the two phone systems at the end of the day that RingCentral would be less expensive. It's going to include all the tools, all the needs that the customer service division will need, plus meet IT's hardware and software needs also. That was pretty much it. Any questions?
Yeah, I guess I'll start.
Go ahead.
This is for customer service.
It's for the entire PUB. The
So
entire
it's
for the
internal use or external use or both?
both internal, external phone system. So it's going to be kind of a completely forklift approach. We haven't done this probably last 15, 16 years. We've been with our current phone system.
Sure.
So this would be a new system right out of the gate for both internal, external customers. It would help the customer service division. That's what we focused mainly on. For the day-to-day user, it's going to ring, you're going to have your extensions, transfer calls, things like that, faxing capabilities, et cetera. But the enhancement that customer service needs, that's where we focused, I guess, and that's what, at the end of the day, that's what gave RingCentral, the advantage. They had a lot more reporting utilities, chat applications, Spanish, English, various languages. It could predict, you could call back the user if, for example, currently the system, it calls back, so this one would do the same thing, just like all the other, I guess, major franchises, banks, that they have these enhanced phone systems that we currently do not have that right now.
Yeah, good. Yeah, it's a great idea for you guys to take that approach, obviously to focus on the customer service. In the end, my general questions were, how is this going to benefit the ratepayer, right? And I think to that extent is making it easier for them to communicate with us.
Correct.
Having different tools at our disposal to maintain that communication with them. That's why I was asking about the AI stuff. I guess that would be, for supporting that, getting maybe messaging with them.
Right.
Have you, other than the demos that you got, are you aware of any other business that uses RingCentral?
The only one that, because current employee of ours, they used to work at the South Padre Island, and they had RingCentral as their complete phone system there. So He has some experience that, is going to help us, a little advantage to,
The city of South Padre or
the city
what?
of South Padre, yeah, he used to work there. And he's been with us 2 years, so, that's the only insight that we have for Ring Central. Anyway, there was, Diane, our purchasing warehouse manager, did go out for some references. There was a rating chart that we did based on that, that included, the project understanding, the approach, the project team, the experience, the quality of their services, the proposed cost, and also the references. So that's what got Ring Central the most points at the end.
Yeah. From the security perspective? any
Security perspective, I
concerns?
think, no, we deal with that every day on a day-to-day basis. We
Is it
looked
an
at their.
American company or where they're from,
Ring Central? Ring Central is, it's its own company itself. They do send a team to do the installation, one-time installation, startup, fees. But then after that, you're gonna, it's gonna be a hosted system. We're gonna have to look at different service level agreements before we, sign the contract, and make sure that, we have the support and service that we need, in order to move on. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so, just from the security perspective, you make sure you guys
No, we do.
double check that,
we
and,
do
just as
that.
a utility, right, that's,
Right.
is not just a normal business, provides power to the city, essentially, so.
No, we deal with that every day. The security aspect of it, we're constantly monitoring. We have tools to monitor, of any, imminent attacks.
Any redundancy, if there's
There's
a
gonna be different.
power outage, and if it's cloud-based, is that
Well,
gonna
yeah.
affect you?
Being it cloud-based, because before, in the traditional system that we have right now, it still works with, traditional phone lines, for example. And we have phone lines coming out of power plant, SRWA, and then there's some that leave here from the main building. As far as redundancy now, this system's gonna work over the internet. So we do have dual service providers. Currently, we have Smartcom, and we do have Spectrum. And we're working on upgrading those links also to give us a more throughput. And they are redundant. So if one is to fail, the entire company, fails over to one provider and vice versa. So we do have that power. Hopefully, we do have the power that we need. We do have redundancy in our network operation centers here and at the power plant. The power plant, we just got a new installed generator probably about a year and a half ago, so that's been working well, and I don't foresee it. And the only reason that we would go basically down is if we had a major disaster, natural disaster. And we did talk about that with all the vendors, with Ring Central and the different vendors that were proposing their solutions. And at that point in time, that's why I included there the mobile app, so the end user could log into an application on their mobile telephone, and then from there begin taking calls. And we thought about that, or we integrated that into the proposal also, because in case we have another COVID, another virus that we need to work from home, or let the employees go, and or any disaster, or freeze, for example, like in the next days, things like that. So we included those things, those factors, and those tools that we need to take care of that.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't want to get off topic on your internet service providers, but if there's any benefit for us to consider, like a Starlink or something, right, that is satellite-based, that might be something for you guys to look at.
Right, and we are working, right now, I was talking to Eddie right now, right before the meeting. We are working on a Motorola T-Mobile radio solution. We're planning to, probably in the next meeting, I'll bring something up, maybe just informational, that we're working to transfer all the Motorola two-hand radios, the old type, to T-Mobile because of that. T-Mobile has said that in July, but really it's going to be probably to the end of the year. They have told us that, for example, in California with the fires, they did activate that Starlink signal for those radios for the firefighters in the California area to assist with that. So, yeah, we are looking at that. We're looking forward to that, to those T-Mobile
Yeah,
services. And that
T-Mobile
Starlink.
or directly with Starlink, right, if you guys need a backup line or something.
Right.
just for you guys to consider.
Yeah, those satellite radios. Yeah.
That's all my questions.
Thank you for your
Chair,
presentation.
I'm sorry, if I may, I don't believe we answered one of the questions completely.
Okay, which
Mr.
one?
Martinez had asked whether Ring Central was a US-based company?
Yes, Ring Central is US-based, and they are going to have different, in the initial RFP, we did request that, US data centers only, because we don't want our data center, to be in, foreign country. And it's all going to be US data center. And they did guarantee that there's going to be various, dual redundant data centers for the phone system.
Good, thank you.
Thank you. And
All right.
thank you for providing the proposal rating chart.
Okay.
I appreciate that. And I think we can recommend this for consent agenda. Is that okay? Yes.
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
All right,
Yes,
thank you very much.
Item number 3, water conservation and drought contingency planning.
Good afternoon, Mark Dombrowski, Chief Operating Officer. So I'm following up on a request to give you an update of where we stand on our update for the water conservation and drought contingency plan that we're updating. So what we've been doing so far is we've retained the expertise of an engineering firm, Garver, who've been working with. We have been going through lots of data, and that data has helped decide how we set goals as well as measures for both our water conservation as well as drought response. So I'm going to give you a snapshot of what we have today and the things that we know we're missing that we're going to continue to look at. So it's having to go through some of that water data, understand how that water is being consumed by our customers. We're going to look at both 10-year data that we're really using for our conservation planning, and then our 2-year data, kind of as drought management, how we're going to connect those to the goals and measures, and finally some of the next steps that we have going. First, may not be obvious, there is a difference. So water conservation is really about using less water in the long term, and all those measures to do that. While drought management is sort of temporary measures because we have a decrease in the supply for some reason. They're not the same. And so the measures we do will be different for each of those. I'm also going to talk about revenue and non-revenue water. So revenue water is basically the water that we sell. In a way, the non-revenue is everything else. And so you take your plant production, you subtract out all of your water that you sell, that you've sold through your meters, and everything else is non-revenue water. And it may be broken down into unbilled authorized consumption or water losses, apparent losses, or real losses. And then our goal as the water provider is to try to address those non-revenue water measures. And I'm going to get into a little bit more of that later. We also have classification of our customers. So right now we have 4 major classifications. Residential, which is really single-family dwellings. We have commercial, which is, as you can imagine, is all the businesses in our service territory, but it also includes multifamily buildings on master meters. And so many of these are apartment complexes. So they're residential in terms that people live there, but they are on a commercial account. So we made some adjustments for those accounts, as well as irrigation accounts. Wholesale is water that we sell to other utilities for resale. Often those numbers are excluded from some of the statistics we're showing because that's not water that our customers are using, it's water that some other customers are using. And finally, municipal, which is really limited to the city of Brownsville and Brownsville Public Utilities accounts.
El Jardín water would be wholesale?
Would be a wholesale. El Jardín, the Navigation District, Military Highway, those are our major wholesales. And really what we're doing is a pretty simple process, although it's, the details get pretty complex. So we're analyzing the supply and demand of our water. We're figuring out what are the relevant indicators that we should institute some sort of drought measures. We're going to create achievable goals, and then we're going to adopt meaningful measures. That is, if we do these measures, we can expect to achieve the goals. This has been a piece that's been missing in the past. While our plan is fully compliant with state requirements, we haven't done the data analysis to really prove that case.
So, can you repeat that? What has been missing in the past?
So in the past, we followed a state template for our water conservation drought contingency plan, so it's fully compliant, and we have restriction measures in it, right? You can't water the lawn, but twice a week in certain hours, no car washing, stuff like that. What we haven't done is analyze how our customers use water, and whether if we take those measures, what kind of savings can we achieve on the drought measurement. We may be overpenalizing ourselves, or we may not have enough measures. We're not sure, and that's what we're assuring here.
Okay.
So when we talk about water supply, in the short run, there's not a lot we can do about a water supply. So certainly we have the municipal water supplies are held in our reservoirs, Falcon and Amistad. And really what we're doing to influence that is we're working with the International Boundary Water Commission as well as our state legislators to influence that supply. So that may be making sure Mexico provides their share, or making sure that the dams are repaired like they're supposed to so we don't have water leakage, things like that. Plant capacity at SRWA is the main constraint on supply, and that is we produce about 6.5 million gallons per day out of SRWA, and that's really about all the plant can produce at this point. But if we wanted to increase the supply, we need to increase that plant capacity. That includes the wells. There's enough water in the alluvium to increase the supply, so it's the capacity that's the constraint. We do have a couple projects that we've identified, and we're seeking grant money for that to expand that capacity, so that would increase our supply. And we have indirect potable reuse. This is where we're looking at taking the effluent discharge from Robindale wastewater treatment plant, flowing it through the Rezacas and into the water treatment plant right back here, number 2. So that's about 8 million gallons per day that we could increase our supply with. We're studying that. We've applied for some grants. And really the constraint there is, again, the funding, and that the maximum outflow is what the output of the plant. But those are things that we could do to increase our water supply. The next is to lower our demand. And there's a lot of constraints on here. So first is our population is growing. And as the population grows, you need more water. Climate change, we're seeing warmer temperatures that causes evaporation and more frequent droughts. Economic growth in the RGV. We've all read the articles about SpaceX showing up and the various businesses around here. So with that brings industrialization, urbanization, higher water demand. If you remember that we did our 2025 water strategy plan here, that a lot of these projects to address some of these water demands are identified, and they're currently being pursued. So the goal there is really to lower our demand so that the supply we do have lasts longer. And so after crunching a lot of data, this is kind of what it tells us. So first is our non-revenue water. Remember those gray areas? That's the water that we don't sell to our customers, but we treat. It's about 12.5%, which is better than industry average. Industry average, depending on the year, is 13 to 16%. San Antonio last year was about 20%, so it's much higher. So that's a good number, and it's something we can continue to work on to try to drive down that non-revenue water. The majority of our sales are with residential customers, about 54% of our sales. But that growth is flat. It's almost the same as it was 10 years ago. And that the consumption is correlated with rainfall, at least on an annual basis. We have a number of increasing accounts on the commercial side that really reflects economic growth, but that increase is pretty modest as far as the consumption goes. You can see that we've had a 2.1% annual growth in customer accounts, but only a 0.8% increase in water usage. Between that and what we're seeing in residential, it tells us that we're being pretty efficient in our water use. Even though our population is growing, we're adding more commercial accounts, the water consumption isn't necessarily growing, so that's a good thing. If you look at our municipal and wholesale consumption, it is growing. You can see there, Municipal is about 4.6 growth there, and the wholesale 6.4. And on the municipal side, we actually have fewer accounts over the 10-year period. So, but it only comprises 7% of our total sales. But we are looking into that. So, for example, some of the staff have been working on this. I need to call out to our billing group. They've done a phenomenal job helping provide data. Our water production side, who's given us the data on the production numbers, and our operations administrator, Luis Jimenez, who's been crunching a lot of numbers. For example, we found out that the lift stations were using much more water over the last few years. And we tied it back to the biofilters. Biofilters require water in order to grow the material in there that absorbs the odors. And so the trade-off is we could use less water there, but then the biofilters wouldn't work and we'd have more odor in our neighborhoods, right? So those are the trade-offs, and you don't know that until you start going account by account, which is what we're doing now. So we're going to target those municipals to try to get that consumption down as low as possible, but there will be trade-offs.
Can you go back really quick?
Absolutely, there.
Oh, it was rainfall correlation.
Right. So I've got a slide on here. So
Sure.
We looked at, of the types of classes of customers, which ones were most impacted by local rainfall. So this is rainfall here in Brownsville, not over a watershed. And we saw that residential is fairly strongly correlated. I only have 10 observations, right? So it's, it's a somewhat weak argument, but I do have a visual to show you.
Yeah.
It's not the same on a monthly basis, but on an annual basis, there's a pretty high correlation. Underwater production, you use 10 years of history. It's been pretty stable between all three plants. And the growth of production has been pretty modest, of about 0.8% compound annual growth rate there. As you can imagine, if our production's grown about 0.8, our consumption's grown about 0.8. But you can see there, the tallest bar there, those are the residential customers, and that's in billions of gallons on the bar chart, followed by the commercial. The green bar there is our wholesale customers. There's 3 or 4 of those. Municipal is those BPUB and the city accounts and the non-revenue water, and you can see how they've trended over time. But you notice that our accounts are growing. That's really the commercial and residential accounts that are growing the fastest. So even though our accounts are growing at a pretty good pace, the consumption has not, which again leads to our system is becoming more efficient, our customers are becoming more efficient, and that proves itself in some of the other data I'm going to show you. So here's the rainfall. Over 10 years, you can visually see that the green line is the rainfall in inches that we got from NOAA, that as we get more annual rainfall, we see a reduction in water usage. So that tells you a decent amount of that water is being used. It's probably for watering lawns and gardens and things like that. Again, I only had 10 observations, but that's a pretty strong correlation there.
The R squared is pretty low, no? 0.4439?
Right, so that tells you that when rainfall increases, that water consumption decreases. So that's a pretty strong coefficient there. Again, it's only 10 observations, so but it's worth noting. And why it's important is if we start looking at these measures, how much weight should we give on like lawn watering, right? So how much result can we get if we limit lawn watering? Because this tells me that a fair amount of our water is probably using for lawn watering.
I would love it if you could tell me, just give me an idea of how much money we could save if we were to help transition customers to xeriscaping, for example.
Right.
That would help us understand how much money we could invest into initiatives like this.
Right.
I think for Texas, 30% of the water, this is the clean potable water, goes to landscape irrigation,
Right.
which is a lot. Yes.
Right, and that's what we're using this data for. We're also using Best Science, which is we're looking at what American Water Works Association, Texas Water Development Board, they have a lot of data. We're looking at what other cities are doing here in Texas, across the country, because it's pretty difficult to measure the impact of these water conservation measures. But if you have enough time and enough observations, you can look at it and get a sense of it, so that if you ask us to reduce our gallons per capita per day 10%, what are the things we could do to achieve that 10% and have some sense of confidence that, in fact, we would achieve that? That's what we're working on now.
Great, thank you.
Okay. So that leads to the next one, which is when we look at water conservation, it's a long-term goal, and probably one of the best metrics, and it's recommended by Texas Water Development Board, is gallons per capita per day. So this includes all of the water that's used except for wholesale, because that's somebody else's water, right? This is the water, so it's commercial, residential, and municipal use, and non-revenue water. And you divide it by the number of people that you serve. And on our calculations, you see it's a slight increase from 91.2 to 95.7. But just as a point of reference, I gave you what was in 2018. The Texas average was 142 gallons per capita per day. So historically, we've been much below the state average. We're trying to work to get some more numbers. We need to make sure we're all measuring it the same way so the metrics are comparable. And just how we calculate this, the way we counted people was, we know from the census what the Brownsville people per household are, and each year they do an estimate between the censuses. So we got that data. We multiply that times the number of residential accounts we had, and then we looked at the billing system to find those multifamily homes and those accounts, and we accounted for those as well to get the per capita. So this is intended to cover our service territory, because there's parts of the city that we don't serve, and we serve parts outside the city. So it's not a perfect match, but this is our best estimate. On the drought side, we're really looking at the near term, and so we're looking at our 2-year average, and I'll show you why we picked a 2-year average. So this is the average monthly consumption for the last 2 years for residential, commercial, wholesale, and municipal. And you can see the trend is there. Certainly, those summer months of July and August, September, you can see that spike in the residential that's probably associated with lawn watering, but commercial as well waters landscape. So you can see a slight spike there as well. The wholesale and municipal isn't necessarily really influenced by those summer months. And we did look at rain on a monthly basis, and there's not much of a correlation here. You can see that the blue bar is the rainfall in 2023, and the blue line is the consumption. So even though we had much higher rain, some of the summer months there, we also had much higher consumption. So it's sort of the inverse of what we saw on an annual basis. So it just tells you people aren't necessarily influenced on a monthly basis by the rainfall. It's more of an annual data point we saw. And then finally, one of the things we're looking at is since we are principally serving residential customers, what measures could we use to help influence that on a drought basis? And so when you look at this, the blue bar represents the number of accounts using the amount of water under that bar. So in this case, we have just about 7,000 accounts that use less than 1,000 gallons per day. And the green dot represents what percentage of the total water consumed by all customers that represents. You can see it's a very small amount. And that's how you read the bars across. If you look at, I kind of grouped some of them. If you look at customers that use 6,000 gallons or less, they represent 37,000 accounts, but it represents 19% of our total sales. So I'd say most of those customers are using water pretty efficiently. If you go to the other end of the scale, we have 82, almost 8,300 accounts that represent almost 20% of the sales in 23. So if you talk about what might be excess users, I think those are excess users. If you want to talk about surcharges and excess charges, those are probably one we might want to impact. And looking at this data, it probably could have a sufficient or a significant impact on how customers use water if the surcharge were large enough, right? We would have to have some sort of exceptions to that. There may be medical reasons or some other reason why someone uses much water that we have an exception to. But on the whole, we have looked at some of these counts, and we think some of them are excessive. So we're continuing to drill into this data. But that gives you a sense of where the water is being used on the residential side. So we have a few customers using a whole lot of water.
I love this.
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you think? I think we could even, this is very useful when talking about surcharges, like you said. It might be too low what we have it at right now. Right now we have it at 1.5, right, for stage 3.
Right, and you can do a surcharge and an excess water usage. They're different tools, and we want to make sure that whatever we adopt or we recommend to you targets those types of customers and that we can expect. We're looking at some of the empirical data from other water companies that when they apply these types of surcharges, and quite honestly, it should hurt, right?
Right.
And so
we want to modify the behavior. We
Exactly.
don't want to like make more money
Right.
off of it.
if these people are making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, you increase their water bill by $40, they probably don't care, right?
Right.
So that's what we want to do with Target, and we can see how much water is being used, and we can look at what other utilities have done that's been effective and measure how much they've been able to change behavior, then we can do the same thing, right? So how much savings can we get from these customers if we apply a surcharge? And the idea is that to not recover the surcharge. And one thing we might recommend is if we do a surcharge, all those dollars collected, because it's not cost recovery, all those dollars collected go to a special fund to pay for water conservation measures. So we can get more benefit from those dollars.
Great.
So this was 2023, which is interesting. I then looked at, so you remember 23, we had a lower rain year, and 24, we had higher rain year. And we see a little bit of shift. So now we've added many more accounts to those lower bars, right? So you have more customers using less water, and now that's almost 27% of the total consumption. So that's a good thing. We have more customers using fewer amounts of water. And those higher customers, we did see a reduction there. So now we're down to 7,000 accounts, and it only represents 16.6% of the water. And so that number varies. That's a pretty significant variance year to year. And that's something else to consider when we're taking that, which is when you do a surcharge, it's really a part of drought management, and it's a short-term measure. And so how much water can you save will really depend on maybe some of these other influences that we're not sure of right now. But I think even almost 17% of our total water is still a significant amount of water that we could impact with those surcharges.
So right now, have you tried looking at the houses that have the 2 meters, like an irrigation meter? Is that what it's called?
We do. We've got the data. It's a little hard to parse right now. We're going to keep working on it. But that would be part of it. So like if they have a separate irrigation meter, you could prohibit that use or surcharge on that. There's questions about, we have customers that have pumps in the Lazakas in one of the yards, right? Should we stop that? Should we try to control some of that or put a fee on that? I think those are all policy questions we'd have. But we don't yet have that granular data yet on those irrigation meters, but that's something we're looking at.
Okay, thank you.
So this, I thought it was important to give you an example. We have not run this, so this is it's not a proposal, it's not a recommendation. In fact, some of these numbers are made up. I made them up sitting in my chair, just to show you how it works. But I can tell you our 2-year average million gallons per day is 9.4 on residential. The same with commercial, municipal, wholesale. Those are all accurate numbers. So in the last 2 years, so that comes out to almost 18 million gallons per day has been our consumption. If, for example, we had a goal, and say you wanted to save 23% total water, how might we parse that out? Because again, each customer class uses different water differently, and they use different amounts of water, right? So you could say, we'll just do a 23% across-the-board haircut. Everyone save 23%, right? That might not be logical. It might not even be feasible, and that's what we're trying to figure out. So on here, because residential uses 54%, they're going to be closer to that average savings we're trying to hit. So here I use 20%, 25% savings on commercial, 50% on municipal, and 20% on wholesale. Wholesale is a little tricky because we have contracts, and we have to abide by those contracts, and some of those wholesale customers gave us water rights, so they have a right to the water. So we have to work with them. I believe most of them probably have their own water conservation drought contingency plan, so we'll have to work more of a partnership with them. We can't impose necessarily our will on them. So this example, if you add that up across the volumes, that gives you 23%, and then what that reduced million gallons per day would be. So residential would go from 9.4 to 7.5, and that's how logic works. If you remember, we had about a 95 million gallons per day per capita, or 95 gallons per capita per day number. So in this scenario, we would get down to about 82 gallons per day per capita. So that's a pretty significant reduction. So we need to tie these to consumption patterns and volumes, because if we're trying to extend our supply out, that's the idea is, you know, we make our supply of water last longer. And then you have to have these measures, and I think this is what we were talking about earlier, Dr. Zamora, which is we're going to do these things, and hopefully if you do them right, you'll achieve that savings. So again, this is not a proposal recommendation, but we might say we're going to implement an excess water surcharge. And best evidence might say that we'll give you a 5% savings. Once per week lawn watering may give you a 7% savings, not at-home car washing, 5%, and pool maintenance refilling only might give you a 3%. So if you do all those things and you reduce your water consumption, that gets you down to the 7.5 MGD, which is the 20% we're targeting. So I think we have some good information on here. We're working with Garver on designing these, and to tie them back to make sure that the science and the data is there that tells us if we go through these painful steps that we'll actually achieve what we're targeting. And finally, it has to be some flexibility to meet community needs and priorities. And so we might have 8 or 10 measures that we want to look at, but perhaps, you know, the policies will only implement 6 or 7 of them, and that gets us to where we need to be. So that gives you that flexibility in your plan.
One last thing.
Yes.
I mean, I don't know how feasible this could be, but so lawn, like grass, right, that takes a lot of water. And trees, on the other hand, with deeper roots, they only need water initially, but not as much once they're established. Would there be any way to differentiate between watering, you know, lawn watering versus, you know, needing to water tree plantings?
Probably not in terms of something that we can monitor. And I have some information here about some of the challenges of implementing that, but you're right. I did see where, if you look at Austin Water, they have lawn watering restrictions. And ours just basically says you can water, you know, by hand and, you know, twice a week, no sprinkler systems. But there are efficiencies that you can do so that if you have a home lawn sprinkler system, which a lot of new homes come with those now, or a hybrid system, it gives you the specifications that so you can program your system to water your yard. You know, you can set it by timer and all that stuff. And so it gives you that flexibility. We need to build that to the plan so that people who do have sprinklers aren't encouraged to cheat the system. But there's some problems with monitoring that, and I'll get to that here in a minute. So we're going through all the literature and all the guidance that we get from the state and American Water Works. This is an example of just maybe a fifth of the total best practices that we're looking at. So some are system improvements. So these are things that we do as a water utility to try to really reuse, or decrease that non-revenue water mostly, but there is some revenue water as well. But, and as you remember in our 2025 water strategy, a lot of things we are currently pursuing. So water system audits, leak detection, we're replacing all of our meters. Meter loss is a big use of water. So we're looking at all those system improvements. We have awareness campaigns. So this is really the communications we're doing with our customers and community. Social media, our billboards, the flyers you see in your bills, public service announcements. We have incentivize. We do some of these, but we don't do a lot, and there's a reason why I'll get to in a minute. But we do have a lot of empirical evidence that people will participate, and this is really for conservation, they will participate in measures if you incentivize them. Good examples, last year we used the toilet rebate program, right? So leaking toilets can cause, massive amounts of water loss over a sustained period. But a relatively inexpensive fix is to replace the mechanics in the tank. You do that, you save the water, right? So we can help customers save water. That's just one example. We have subsidies for rainwater harvesting. A lot of utilities are doing that now. I think the point you picked on, which is grants for drought-resistant landscaping, xeriscaping, right? So can we help customers in that area? And finally, enforcement. So these are like plumbing code standards. Every couple of years, the American Plumbers Association, I think that's the name of them, they come out with with standards for plumbing, and it's really focused on water conservation. We should make sure that our building codes use the latest standards so that we can capture that.
So they currently don't, the city building codes?
We have the former planning director here, so perhaps she can respond.
I believe that that the actual is 2018, if I'm not mistaken. That was the last update that was done.
And I think there's been an update from the plumbing code since then, so.
That's the latest I
Yeah, we can check, but we want to make sure we're using the latest technology, the latest practices, the latest standards, so that when new homes are built, they're water efficient.
That would include like shower heads, like more efficient shower heads?
Shower heads, plumbing, the types of pipes are in there, all those types of things.
Bad joke. I'll just laugh in my head.
Okay. Other types of enforcement, obviously the penalties for excessive water use, mandatory water audits in all large customers, enforcement drought stages, implementing water rationing, and banning essential water use. So, as with any great idea, there's great problems. So, when it comes to the system maintenance, it really impacts our water conservation.
Wait, sorry.
Yeah.
One more question on the last slide. The code enforcement,
Yes.
like penalties for excessive water use.
Yeah.
Tell me about that. Or enforcing drought response stages.
Right, so there's the surcharges that we can bill based upon billings, right? So we have that data. If you have a code enforcement or excess water enforced drought response stages. So this is the point you pointed about the lawn versus the tree, right? I have no way to know what you're using the water for. It doesn't tell me on the meter. And the only way to know that is to go out and observe it. And the only way to go out and observe it is to have, for lack of a better term, a water cop. We don't have any. We don't really have code enforcement here.
I see. But trees are usually watered by hand.
It could be, but I don't know you're out there by hand, and I don't know if you have the sprinkler going, and I don't know if you're.
Because right now there's a difference, right? Right now, the restrictions on the lawn watering is only if you do it on the irrigation system, right?
Right.
Right. When you
Yeah.
do it with the hose, you can do it with the
Right.
hose, but
You can do it with a hose, you can do it with a can. You're not supposed to use a sprinkler. You can do it twice a week during certain hours of the day. But quite honestly, we don't know unless someone calls or one of our, we do have these, our crews have these little tags that if they see a violation in the neighborhood, they'll stop and put a door hanger. It's not an enforcement, it's an awareness campaign. There's no penalty to let people know that. We have things like you're not supposed to wash your vehicles at home. That might be an enforcement. I have no way of knowing you're washing your vehicle. I don't know how many times you're washing it unless there's a water cop monitoring you, right? So those are very difficult to enforce. That doesn't mean you don't have them, because that's part of the awareness campaign. And if, in fact, you find a violation, then you have the ability to enforce it. But that gets into sort of what I'm covering next year, which is there's a lot of limitations. So just to get back on the sense of maintenance on the water conservation is really what that impacts. We have work prioritization. And so we will send our crews to the most severe problem going on at the time, right? So we have a major water leak, we're going to address that. We might not address a lot of smaller leaks. If we have new customers, we have an obligation to serve, so we have to make sure those customers are connected. We also have a detection and access. Unlike electricity that is really monitored, we don't always know when there is a leak in the pipe that's subsurface. Sometimes we get indicators, you might see water running down a driveway, you'll see a wet spot, something like that. We do have a contract that's we're executing that will use acoustics. So what they're going to do is when it's really quiet at night, no one using, they're going to basically put a stethoscope on our pipes and listen for leaks. That's really the next best way. So detecting it is a challenge for us. We don't always know it. If we see an increase in that non-revenue water over time, it might tell us there's a leak we're not aware of. The other one is access. Much of our infrastructure is underground. It's under sidewalks and streets and things, driveways. So if we have a very small water leak, we have to do the cost-benefit analysis. Do I tear up $10,000 worth of someone's driveway in order to fix a $100 leak? So the access does become an issue for us. Awareness campaigns, it's useful for both water conservation and drought contingency, but I call it customer ad fatigue. You hear the same ad so many times, you tune it out, right? So you have to change those up, you have to make them entertaining, you have to use different media as people get their news from different ways. And it's difficult to measure the effects because there's so many things going on. You can have an ad campaign and see a reduction in water use and think it's the ad campaign, but what it really was is it rained, right? So people use less water that month, so it's hard to measure the impacts. To incentivize is water conservation. These are long-term projects. We don't have a direct funding source for this. And so the money that our customer care group uses and the marketing group, it's really the money we can put together by not doing other things, but we don't have a funding source for those programs. That's why I talked about if we have a surcharge, that could help fund some of those programs. Other water utilities have a community benefits charge that they assess on all customers, and that's used to fund these incentive programs. That might be something we want to consider. And diminishing opportunities, what I mean there, but like the leaky toilets, once you fix all the leaky toilets in Brownsville, you have to go to something else, right, because they're all fixed. And that really impacts revenue water. And finally, the enforcement. Enforcement is really geared towards drought contingency. Those temporary measures used to curtail water use. We do not have enforcement staff. We don't have water cops. The code enforcement for the city, I think, is, you'll have to talk to the city about that. But we don't have staff that can go out and monitor, are you watering your tree or are you watering your yard? How many times have you watered your truck this month or washed your truck? And when you do enforcement and it's a code violation, those people then can take that to court. And now you have your employees tied up for court hearings and things like that. So it takes a lot of effort, it takes a lot of staff, it takes training how to deal with people in hostile situations. And our staff is not trained that way. So we need to think about how would we enforce this if we're going to implement it. I'm not saying we don't have it in the code. I'm just saying if we want to enforce it and get the maximum benefit that we're going to forecast, we'll have to have some sort of enforcement tool. We don't have that now. And customer resentment, which is it makes customers angry. And we should expect that during drought time. So we're going to get complaints from customers when you do these enforcement measures. So A lot of these things I've talked about, we are doing. And if you go back to our water strategy components, we had 14 strategies we're currently pursuing with different projects and programs. I'll let you go back to that water strategy and read it. But many of the things we already have ongoing. So it's not like we're waiting for this to happen. And finally, we have what we have currently ongoing. So we'll continue to look at our data. We're going to establish some gallons per day per capita goal that's realistic. We're going to prioritize those measures with the highest benefit based upon how those customers use water, develop a monitoring system to measure the progress, create a funding source for those incentives. If we want to reward customers, we need a way to fund that. We're going to assess our building codes for improvements. We're going to work with the city on that, create an awareness campaign, and finally coordinate with city staff, because in the end, if we update the ordinance, that has to go through our city commission, and it has to be get approved by the TCEQ, the Water Development Board. And then on drought management, we're continuing to look at a supply forecast. This is becoming more difficult than you might think. We know that our reservoirs are down. I think they're about 20% right now combined. That means there's a certain amount of water in there. Translating that amount of water in our reservoirs to how much water can flow into our plants to treat and send to our customers is difficult. There's a lot of things we have to account for, but we are working on that. The whole idea is that if you have
Can you repeat that?
Yeah, so we have all the water in the reservoirs, and some of it is for municipal use, right? It's reserved. We have water rights, so we have a right to that water, and we can call the water master and release that water and send it down here. At some point, the water flows into our water treatment plant, so we can treat it and send it out to our customers. So that's the true supply, which is what gets to our plants. So converting that 20% in each of the reservoirs into gallons per day at our plant is the difficult part, and we're trying to put together a model that will do that. And the whole idea is that I know 20% of water in the reservoirs is bad. If you think about it, 80 is better, right? 100 is the best. But I can't tell you what does that mean in terms of how much water do we have. What if you had I think Luis called it a doomsday clock, right? If you had a doomsday clock when you run out of water, I can't tell you that. I can tell you how much water we use, but I can't tell you how long that supply will last against that use. And that's the model we're working on.
Yeah, that was one of the comments I was going to make was, I mean, I know we moved some water into Resacas. I mean, we've talked about
That's
that with
part
the
of the
whole
use.
Resaca
That's
thing,
right.
right? So I was curious to see, we have visibility for how much of that is going there.
We do. So we do know how much water we put into the Resacas. We meter that. And that is one of the potential measures that we could do, which is to not put water in a Resaca. But again, there's a consequence. Town Resaca, it's around our zoo and the parks down there. And if you don't put water in it, eventually it'll dry up, right? And you have fish kill and odor and all those problems, and it's not as pretty. That's why I talk about community benefits and priorities, right? That might be a priority for our community. They would rather not wash their cars maybe than keep water in the Resaca. I don't know. But those are the things that we want to offer the board as options when we go into these measures, that you have sort of a menu you can pick from to try to achieve our target.
Yeah. And I don't know, we're tracking that, right? And
We do.
in the future, as we look into reuse, right? So that number also is helpful to see, okay, this is, I forget what the number was, 8%, 18% for reuse?
It's about 8 million gallons per day is what comes
8
out of
million,
Robindale, is
okay,
what
yeah.
we discharge on average, right?
Yeah, so yeah, I mean, some of that information from when we can start to measure would be interesting before we start to process it, for us to kind of have visibility to that. So, and the chart you had was like the couple of steps before or one step before.
Right, exactly. Other things we're doing, we're selecting indicators. We used to call them triggers. I like the word indicators, because a trigger sort of implies when this happens, we're going to do this. And what we found is that that's not necessarily the case, right? You're measuring a lot of different things that could impact your water supply. So we'll have several indicators. One of them will be our reservoir levels. One of them might be our system, right? One of them might be SRWA. So we could have an outage at SRWA that might cause us to indicate we should have a higher level of drought response. So I think indicator is a better word than trigger. Because a lot of folks had said when we get to, I think it's 15%, you get to stage 3. And it may be when we get to 15%, we may have other indicators that says we don't need to take such drastic measures, right? So it's a matter of language, but I think it makes a difference. We're investigating usage by those municipal accounts. You know,
You're investigating what?
the usage by our municipal accounts. So these are the city accounts and the BPUB accounts. You saw that they've had the greatest increase in water usage over the last 10 years.
Yeah, what's up with that?
We're investigating. So one is the lift stations, right? So it explains it. One might be Silas Ray, and that is really dictated on how much power it produces. So the more power it produces, the more water it needs. There may be reasons why, and again, it may be for a community benefit that we think we value and we want to allow them to use that water. We don't know, but we're digging into that data right now, and I hope to come back with you some of that. If there's areas that we can conserve water on, we will. And you know, I think we have to be the example for the community. If we're going to ask them to conserve, we need to conserve as well.
As we get into maybe when stage 3 happens, I'm guessing that we're going to have higher costs, but I'm not really sure that that will be the case. Can you explain the economics of that?
If we go into stage 3. I don't know if we will have higher cost. Certainly, the water quality as it lessens, and I'm not the chemist expert, either the water treatment expert, but as the chemistry of the water changes, the treatment for it to turn it into potable water changes. So that could increase costs, like increased chemical costs or energy costs to push it through the RO. It could be that the salinity of water overcomes our ability to treat water at the plant. As the water source in the river gets lower, the salinity of the water increases. So those are the things I think we'd have to, I'm sure we have experts can come talk to you about that. We can put that on the calendar. But so those costs might go up. If we have to start like rotating outages, right, you know, rationing water, it may be we'd be on a boil water notice more frequently. And that would increase our customers' energy costs, right? Because now you have to boil the water before you use it. So your gas bill, your electric bill goes up. We'll probably have more problems with our systems. It's designed to maintain a certain pressure. When it doesn't have those pressures, it might not operate as efficiently. So there could be increased cost. I just can't tell you how much or exactly where, but I will talk to my crew, and that might be something we look at in this plan, which is what are the implications if we go into a stage 3 and we might expect.
How about the cost of SRWA expansion?
So right now, the expansion is to go from design capacity of 10 million gallons per day to 20 million gallons per day. And I think that number is around, and that's on top of the total, so the optimization is about $43, $44 million. That gets it up to the 10 million gallons per day.
And that's what's happening right now.
Right, so we have a grant here. We're actually doing some of that work already. We still need the full funding source for that. On top of that, to get to 20 million gallons per day is an additional $180 million. So was that $220, $230 million total cost to expand the plant. So that gives you I hate doing math in public, 13.5 additional million gallons per day. The potable reuse will give you about 8 million gallons per day, and the total cost is probably somewhere between 12 and 15 million. We haven't totally engineered that solution yet. So, and we could probably do that quicker. We have to get TCEQ permission, but that's another option we are currently looking at. We got a grant application in for that as well. So that would probably be our first choice to expand capacity would be the indirect potable reuse.
And is that cost going, like, is that part of the water rates right now?
No, it's not.
And when will it be?
Well, depends on how much grant funding we get. Then we would have to make the difference with our own funding. We'd issue debt for that, so it'd be what the cost of that debt is. And it's probably somewhere between, probably a 3-year project from the time we say okay until it's actually producing water. There's some things at the plant we need to look at as well that we still haven't scoped out. We have a preliminary design or engineering scope that we had to do and for the grant application that was submitted. It's certainly feasible. But I think the funding will be an issue for us.
Okay, thank you.
Drought management, I also mentioned earlier, reviewing those wholesale contracts, understanding what we can do to get their assistance in reducing consumption. We need to select those measures, those things we're going to do to help customers respond to drought management, coming up with a menu of items that we can pick from. Create a method of enforcement. So certainly we need an ordinance, we need the ability to enforce, but I think as we talked about earlier, is we ourselves do not have water cops, and the city doesn't have water cops. So you need to have some method of enforcement.
I'd like to add a little bit something about the funding issue. The funding issue may be an issue with the current rate structure. So it's not that we don't have the funding capability. We do have some debt that's retiring and things of that nature. So we're running those analysis, how much we can issue without increasing rates. So in other words, with anything, you have to have an amount of money that comes in with the amount of money that goes out. So even if somebody else were to come in and say, build this plan, they're going to have to make money. We, as a utility, because we are, a municipal entity, we have access to much cheaper funding capital, as well as other sources because of NADBank or other entities that are specifically for border communities. So just keep that in mind, that when somebody says that there's a funding issue, it's not that we don't have the capabilities, it's a funding plan that we need to provide to you all and what that cost would be. I have here our CFOs can talk more.
It would definitely require a cost of service study. But Marilyn's correct. In 2032, most of the debt for SRWA comes off the books. And so that would give us some leeway at around $3 million a year that we could sustain with the current members' assessments.
Now, the $3 million is the debt funding. So in other words, that $3 million is associated with the amount of issuance that we issue for debt. So in other words, your down payment, your mortgage payment.
Let's see. The other thing we do is develop an exit strategy. So if we have a drought management plan and everything happens as we plan, how do you get out of that drought? What are the indicators that you can start relaxing those measures? We need the incorporate plan. Finally, coordinate with city staff. So those are all the things we're currently working on in order to update the plan.
Okay, thank you.
I had some, maybe some comments. I'm not sure that they're of any value, but one was, is it possible for us to provide, I don't know how to term this, but maybe like added value water, something like the windmills? I mean, could PUB embark on something like that where we would essentially be selling water at a much higher rate than we do currently? We don't have to answer it now, but I was just curious. That might be another potential funding source. And then on the enforcement, definitely, I mean, that's an opportunity. But the other side of enforcement for me is maybe I would call it knowledge base, right? I think when the electricity prices went up, right, a couple of years back, One of the things that I was referencing was there's the CDCB homes, right? These high efficient homes that were maybe 1,300 square foot. And coincidentally, I know a couple of people that live there, so I was asking for their bill, and their bill was essentially $100 when everyone else's was, $400 or $500, right? So I think having the knowledge on what to do, how to minimize, is just as value as enforcement, right? Enforcement is just gonna beat us down, hey, don't use the sprinklers. But if I knew how to do certain things with less water, that would be beneficial to me as a user. So I would also encourage us to explore what else we can do. I mean, I know we have the incentives that we provide, but aside from incentives is have like an actual knowledge base, that we can tap into, and that may feed into potentially building codes, right? So we can't force everybody to have very stringent building codes, because then everyone's home could increase. CDCB's is low income, so we can prove that it's not always super expensive, but at least from the water side, maybe there's things that we can do different. Yeah, so just other than enforcement, I think there's other areas that we can provide. I don't know too many people, maybe a couple that have like artificial grass, so I don't know if that's one way, but if we provide that, then maybe some people may start using that information, taking their own actions, reducing water, and we get to the same place other than enforcement.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess I'll just leave it at that.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Yep.
I would like to add, like Mark was saying, the building code updates began at the city back when I was under my direction. They were completed in 2020, but they still remain there under the 2018 International Building Code and Trade Code, so just
Okay.
wanted to clarify that.
Thank you so much. And that was the last item. No, I think item number 4 was if we had any requests for future agenda items. Do you have anything?
I don't. I think there's already things in queue in play, but not for this committee. I don't have anything. This presentation, Mark, is this going to the big board? I know it's informative for us, but I don't know, is this something we would want to do?
Intending to bring it to the board. This was a request by Dr. Zamora, who's one
Okay.
of the items.
Yeah, well, it is recorded.
Yeah.
At least we can notify them. I think it would be beneficial for the other board members to see some of this. I thought it was pretty useful. But yeah, that was it for me, so.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, and hope you have a great evening. And wait, I need to close the meeting? We don't need a vote, right?
I'm sorry?
We don't need a vote? No? Okay, just adjourn. Thank you.